So we've talked about the three different types of layouts, the three-screen approach to designing for web pages, and we've done the wireframes for each of those based upon the 4, 8, and 12 grid systems. And so now what we get down to is how do we turn this three designs in one into a web page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this in Dreamweaver CS6. The reason I'm using Dreamweaver CS6 is simply so that you can see how this works. It can be done with any HTML editor or even with a text editor, Notepad, whatever you prefer, but it has been integrated into the Fluid Grid has been integrated into Adobe Dreamweaver's CS6. It's not in CS5, and so you'll see here that they have introduced this area called a Fluid Grid layout. The first thing that I'm going to do though is I'm going to create a new site just so that I am starting with a clean slate. And that's all I have to do for now. What that's going to do, obviously, is it's going to set up a file section so that I can save this. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do this. In Dreamweaver, there's always more than one way that you could do it. You could choose New Fluid Grid Layout, and if you're using versions prior to CS6, you're not going to see that in there because this is just emerging way of designing, and it wasn't available until Dreamweaver CS6. But I gotta say that the amount of time that it saves from doing it the other way is it is a nice feature, and I'm sure that it will be integrated into web expressions and all the other web design as we go forward, because this is the way that it looks like design is going to happen. So I could either choose to go New Fluid Grid Layout there, or I could choose Fluid Grid Layout from there. And what it does, this may look familiar to you, it pops up a set of templates here, and it starts with, it's got 5, 8, and 10. I'm going to go, since my designs are based on 4 columns, 8 columns, and 12 columns. That's what I'm going to go off of, and then I'm just going to reduce the amount of column, the gutter in between. This points at the percentage of the gutter, or what percentage of the column width the gutters are going to do. I'm going to do 15% just because 25% is a big gutter. I'm going to leave these as default. What this is saying is that it's going to use 91% of the width of the viewport. This one in the tablet case is going to use 93% of the viewport, and in the desktop it's going to be 90% of the viewport. Now you'll see that up here it tells you that it treats mobile as 480 pixels or anything below 480 pixels, and a tablet it treats as anything below 768 pixels, and a desktop is up to 1232 pixels. Now that could obviously be expanded, but and you can adjust any of these things. You could go to 24 or 36, however many columns that you want to use, and if you want, you can set that back to the default. So what's going to happen is, and we're going to do this in HTML5 because that is the new standard that is out there. So what I do is when I choose create here, the first thing it says is it wants to save a style sheet, and the reason that it wants to save the style sheet first is because you cannot do this type of approach to design unless you are utilizing a CSS based layout, and so or a CSS based presentation. So I'm just going to create the folder called CSS to store my CSS files in it. And I'm going to call that, we'll just call it responsive test. And I'm going to save that. Then what it does is it creates a series of documents. The first one is the blank document, the HTML document that we just created. Then it creates a document called boilerplate.css. And what boilerplate.css is simply a file that is designed to clear out all of the differences between browsers, so that no matter what browser you're using, it's going to have the same set of rules. Because if you think back to the cascade, the highest thing in the cascade is the default browser style sheets. So it's setting all of those default browsers style sheets to the same one. So this boilerplate takes the place of the default style sheet. And that way it sets the way that all the different browsers treat your thing the same. The next thing it does is the responsive test CSS that I created, and it adds this respondmin.js. Now, this respondmin.js is a JavaScript file that is put in place to deal with issues with browsers that don't support the newest CSS, the media queries, which is, we'll talk about that. That's how this works. And so this does a lot of the heavy lifting to allow older browsers the ability to utilize this site functionally. The other thing that we have here is that we have the responsive test.css, which is the same style sheet that we started, that I created. So that's what I named it. And there's comments in here, and you'll find these comments helpful. And this talks about the different rules. And one of the things that you're going to find in here, this first comment is the Dreamweaver fluid grid properties are the mobile, it's 4, the tablets are 8, the desktop is 12, and the gutter percentage is 15. If you recall, those are the settings that I set when I set it up. And then we come into the first thing that you see. So the first thing that's going to be read when it comes to this style sheet is this mobile layout, 480 pixels and below. So the first thing, by default, what it's going to do is it's going to load this first set of styles. And I haven't really added anything to this. You'll notice when this was created, I happen to be looking at the mobile size right at the moment. I could choose to look at the tablet size or the desktop size, but the one that it comes up to naturally is the mobile size, because when you're doing this kind of design, you're designing for mobile first, because that is the most restrictive type of design, and then you build on top of that. And this sort of flips the design thing upside down, whereas it used to design for the big and then adjust for mobile. It flips that around to say that let's start with the most restrictive design first, and we'll add on top of that. And when it created this website, it gave me the 4 columns, and those aren't actually part of the website. What they are is just a tool that allows me to see where those are going to be created. So again, this background template allows you to see these columns. Those columns aren't actually there in the web page, and the way that you can see what it's going to look like without those in the way is to take and go to your live view, and then there's the ability under this visual aids to turn off the fluid grid layout lines, and this is what your page will look like without that. So it's just a visual aid. It's not part of your page, but it allows you to see how that would lay out. And so here it is on the smartphone, here it is on the tablet, and here it is on the desktop. Not real exciting right now, because all it is this background template to allow you to work on this. And so let's go back to our prototype, and let's look at the 3 different grid systems that we have. We've got the 960 grid, we've got the 12 column grid, we've got the 8 column grid, and we've got the 4 column grid, which is the same as when we're in Dreamweaver. The 4 column is the mobile, the 8 column is the tablet, and the 12 column is the desktop. So what I want to do is, since I'm working from the wireframe, I want to build that those elements in. But before I do that, I want to finish what I was talking about over here. The first thing it sees is the 480 pixel and below layout, and so far all we have is one div in here, and we're going to add the divs from our wireframes in a couple minutes. But the first thing that it's going to see is it's going to load this. So if you're on a mobile device that has 480 pixels or below, it's going to load these rules. It's also going to load them if you're on a tablet or a full screen. But then we're getting into the media queries. So as we move up and you have a tablet layout where you're between 481 pixels and 768 pixels, it's going to take these styles because they load first, but then it's going to add on to them this set. And what this is a media query, and this is part of the magic that's required to make this happen. A media query says, look at the media, only media, so it's not going to do this with print, and is it a screen? And if it has a minimum width of 481 pixels, so that puts it into this threshold of being tablet, then you're also going to load these set of rules. So everything in here falls into that group of from 481 to 768 pixels. And what's going to happen is anywhere with, because if you think about the cascade overwrites the rules that it saw first when new rules are applied. That's part of the cascade, is it applies whatever is last loaded and most closely to the content that's there. So you'll notice that the class here of grid container, up here it's got the margin, a different set of rules here than what it has here. So when it comes down to this, it's going to overwrite the width. So it was 88.0326%, and those numbers are come about as a result of math, and we'll get into the math a little bit later on. But the padding is going to be overridden, and these are based upon the fact that this is going to an 8-column layout rather than the 4-column layout, and it needs to expand that container in order to facilitate it. So it's got to expand it, and then it changes the padding on the left and right to fit the space that's available, the design that we're working off of. And then layout div 1, which is just the first layout that is included in here, it is going to overwrite anything that it has to. So the newer rules are going to overwrite the original ones if they are different. The next thing that we see as we go down, just as we came to the tablet, after that block, there's a third block that is the desktop layout. And this is just commented so that you can look at it and understand what it's doing. And what this does is it inherits the styles from both the mobile and the tablet layouts. And then, following the cascade, it changes the rules where necessary. So that, going back to the grid container, it again changes the width, the maximum width, padding, and margin. And the same thing with the layout of div 1. So what we've got here is one design, but we have 3 designs built into that one design, so that it allows us to, just as we're going in our wireframe from the basic set of structural elements, document object model, to 12-column presentation, to an 8-column presentation, to a 4-column presentation. And that's where it becomes critical for you to understand the difference between the structure of your content and the presentation of your content, because that's what this is all about.